It's Friday, September 5th, and the weather is going crazy, bringing severe weather, record breaking low temperatures, and even major hurricanes. And here is Major Hurricane Kiko out here in the Pacific Ocean, reaching a Category 4 hurricane at its peak. We can really see that organized structure with what used to be an eye, really indicating these strong storms. This is a typical Category 4 structure that we would expect to see, and it is now weakening as it moves out towards Hawaii. Now, luckily, when currently Hurricane Kiko reaches Hawaii, it will likely only be a tropical storm, and there's not even a 100% chance of seeing Hurricane Kiko make a landfall in Hawaii. However, there is a decent chance that there would be some tropical storm impacts brought to Hawaii, so this is definitely something that you're going to watch if you're out here in Hawaii. But the big tropical news that you've probably been hearing about recently has been this invest out here in the main development region, which will likely turn into tropical storm and even Hurricane Gabrielle. It now has a 90% chance of formation. I'm pretty certain that this is going to form. And actually, we have seen the track shift more south and west every single day. Pretty much every single model run, the models have trended more south and west, pushing it more towards the Caribbean. But currently, past the Antilles, there's really a very low confidence on this, on where it will actually go. So it's not really worth predicting any landfall in the US at this point. It's kind of useless, but this is definitely going to be the storm that we want to keep a very close eye on as we go into the peak of hurricane season. And here are the European ensembles. We can see that there's actually a pretty uniform agreement all the way up until we get to the Antilles, until it kind of starts going all over the place. Some ensembles bringing it into the Caribbean, some bringing it in north of the Caribbean, and then out into the Atlantic, and kind of just being deflected back out into the Atlantic by those cold fronts like we've been seeing with a lot of our tropical systems lately. But one thing is for certain, this will form into a tropical storm. And actually, we've seen a lot of variance in the intensity from these ensembles, but there is actually a decent confidence that Tropical Storm Gabrielle could even form into Hurricane Gabrielle. So, like I said before, this is going to be the storm to watch very closely as we go into the peak of hurricane season, looking for any impacts to the US potentially. Then for severe weather today, we actually have a pretty decently sized risk, although it's kind of skinny, stretching all the way from the northeastern corner of Texas to the southeastern corner of Pennsylvania. We even have a slight risk up here in parts of far eastern Kentucky, stretching into parts of northern Tennessee as well, kind of in the Appalachian range. And then we have a pretty big marginal risk, which stretches that entire area that I just talked about. And the main risk for this is going to be some 60-mile-an-hour damaging winds, really peaking in that slight risk area, potentially even seeing some 65 to 70-mile-an-hour winds there, although I think it's going to be closely to that 60-mile-an-hour threshold more. And then there is actually going to be a risk of hail as well, although it's more conditional. It would likely only be for a 1 to 1.5 inch in diameter hail thing going on. And then this would stretch our entire marginal risk. And then also there is actually a small isolated tornado risk, pretty much stretching the entire state of Kentucky for a couple of weak spin up tornadoes as well. And then with those record breaking low temperatures I was talking about, it's going to be in this corridor stretching all the way from Montana back into the Michigan region. These record lows are specifically going to be for September. It almost never gets this cold this early in this year. We're really getting our first taste of fall, although it's kind of a false fall as it's going to warm back up next week. But at least for this week, we're going to be able to enjoy some low 60s, 50s, and even if you're further up here in North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and even northern Michigan, you're going to be seeing some mid 40s feels like temperatures, and even at night you might feel some freezing feels like temperatures. Now for the rest of the country out here in the west, it's going to be pretty nice as well, likely not really peaking over mid 80s, but if you're down here in eastern Texas, the Mississippi River Valley, southeast, and even up into the mid-Atlantic, unfortunately, you are going to see a return of those warm temperatures, likely being in that mid-90s range. Then if you're down here in the further parts of the southeast, you're likely going to be feeling some low 100s feels like temperatures as well. But we do have some good news for our flooding threat. It's likely going to be pretty small. We have a big marginal risk out here in the Four Corners states, and also stretching up through Nevada into parts of Oregon, then also South Florida. That would be for that very small threat of flash flooding, only seeing 1 to 2 inches rain in that area. But the main area to watch today is going to be in southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. We have a slight risk there, so potentially 2 to 4 inches of rain and a bit more of a risk of seeing some flash flooding there, although nothing crazy going on flash flooding wise. And here's what the radar is going to look like in our main risk area today, out here in parts of Kentucky and Tennessee, where we could potentially see all hazards of severe weather. So that means hail, damaging winds, and even that conditional threat for a couple of spin up tornadoes. And it looks like our storms are going to initiate pretty late in the afternoon, really letting that atmosphere unstabilize and build up that big storm fuel. We're going to look at that in our weather sounding here in a minute. But for right now, I think that our peak for that tornado risk is really going to be wherever those storms form up here near that low pressure system, our front, and then where our big strong trough kind of meets all together. This model puts it in the more northern parts of Kentucky, but really if you're in that 2% tornado risk outlined by the Storm Prediction Center, definitely stay weather aware. But out here, these storms will bring some 60-mile-an-hour damaging gusts in that corridor, stretching all the way down from Pennsylvania to northeastern Texas, and then likely some small hail as well. So although it's going to be along a cold front and it's going to be pretty linear, I'm actually not going to rule out some 1 to 1.5 inch hail as well. And then these storms will likely get a bit more of a boost when that low level jet kicks in, possibly seeing a rebuilding of that tornado potential only for a short window when that low level jet kicks in. Also, those other hazards of severe weather could potentially increase when that low level jet kicks in the evening hours. But after that, these storms are going to die off pretty quickly, just becoming outflowy and rainmakers. And then moving a bit more south and west in our risk area, looking more in that part from western Tennessee all the way into northeastern Texas, we do have a bit different of a setup out here. We're actually going to have some tropical weather kind of meet our big trough and then our front, and then also a couple of embedded low pressure systems back here as well, kind of leading to a interestingly shaped risk. It's more of a upside down L. We're going to have a bit of a wall out here stretching all the way from western Texas, pushing through that Dallas-Fort Worth area in the early night hours. And that's also going to be when a lot more or stronger storms develop in this corridor from northeastern Texas all the way to western Tennessee. These storms are likely going to develop in the night hours, potentially bringing some strong gusts. I think the severe weather potential in this region is going to be slightly lower, and it's mostly just going to be a lot of rain and some gusty winds, although there is still that potential for some 60-mile-an-hour damaging winds, although I think that's going to be pretty low and only in some very isolated clustered areas. And this will last all the way through the night into daybreak tomorrow. And here is that big trough causing all of our severe weather out here, and those record-breaking low temperatures really being brought down from far up north in Canada into the US, really, but just being sucked by this big trough. It's kind of rare to see troughs this strong in September, but here we are. We do see this big jet max out here. That's going to be the main reason for a lot of our storm forcing in our main risk area today as well. It's kind of a secondary trough embedded in this as well, kind of being one of the reasons for that weird kind of upside down L pattern going on out here from northeastern Texas all the way to western Tennessee. Also why we could potentially see those storms initiated a bit later, and then we'll also see that tropical weather kind of move its way up from Mexico into western Texas, also helping to create that upside down L-shaped risk across Texas as well. And then this is the environment in that main risk area in Kentucky, potentially bringing all hazards of severe weather. So a couple of weak spin-up tornadoes, mostly a damaging wind threat, and even the potential for some small hail in that 1 to 1.5 inch range. Now, tornado threat is going to be fueled by a couple of things. Of course, our cloud base is going to be low enough. And even though our shear doesn't look super impressive, our shear vectors are going to be a bit more parallel to our line of storms. That kind of leads to a couple more pockets of vorticity being made than we normally see if they were pointing perpendicular to our storm line. But one of the main things is that we're going to have a large amount of 3 Cape eclipsing 200. This really increases that threat of some spin-up tornadoes along this line, and then just damaging severe weather in general. Now, onto that damaging severe weather in general, we're going to have a moist environment nearing a 70 dew point, and then a very unstable environment nearing a 3,500 to 4,000 Cape range. That's very favorable for severe weather. For that hail threat, our mid-level lapse rates are looking kind of low, 6.4 Celsius decreasing per kilometer, and our freezing level is a bit high, 14,000 feet. But we do have some Cape up here near our freezing level, and our organizational shear is not bad at all. 35 knots. That's another reason why we could see that threat of severe weather just increased in general, because these storms are going to be more organized. And the last thing is going to be, we have quite a bit of downdraft Cape, 1100 precipitable water that's pretty high, 1.6 inches, then quite a bit of dry air loft in that classic inverted V profile that we just see with general severe weather. So definitely all hazards of severe weather possible out here in this Kentucky risk area today. And then for the rest of the environment along our cold front, it's just going to be this minus the tornado potential. There's going to be a much lower 3 Cape and actually a quite a bit more stable atmosphere, although it's still going to be pretty unstable along that 2,000 Cape range, pretty much anywhere else on this cold front, and it's going to be moist enough to potentially see severe weather in the rest of our marginal risk area.